What are you building?
Okay, so Slurm is a job scheduler.
An AI startup that allowed legal recruiters to screen applications more efficiently in the UK.
How are you going to convince the buyer that this is something that's valuable?
86% of biotech companies plan to migrate their workloads to the cloud.
I don't know a single Fortune 500 in Europe that's buying blockchain technology right now.
Flavor app where you can plan your next dinner without the noise.
I'm going to jump out of the window.
We built a robot that we do that very effectively.
A robot?
Yeah.
I like this more.
Yeah, I like this a lot more.
If you solve a problem for everyone, you solve nothing for anyone.
Okay, so welcome. If you haven't been before to the Offices of Free Agency, I'm Sherveen. I am the founder and CEO of venture-backed Free Agency. If you haven't heard of us, we provide Hollywood-style representation to tech talent. That means a variety of career and job search products targeted at folks who are mid to C-level inside product, engineering, design. But that's the only shilling I really care to do in this moment. I'm also an occasional angel investor. But I'm also the host of the Feedback Loop. We've been doing this for a couple months. Every week, we get to welcome a batch of startup founders on stage to give their 1-minute pitch and then get feedback from me and a guest venture investor, who I'll introduce in a moment. But the whole idea is to move them forward in their storytelling journey. The point, at the end of the day, this could have been more like Shark Tank. I could have said, hey, Brian, write a check. But that would have made this not about what we really make it about, which is the story, the narrative, the pitch that ultimately can hold a lot of founders back from raising more money, from hiring, from selling their product. Because even if you have the right idea, the right market, sometimes you're even the right founder, the notion of telling that great elevator pitch in any of these rooms can really, really move you forward. And so we're hoping to move their stories forward. Part of this that I'm super excited about every single week is I get to welcome a guest venture investor who is a Czech writer who lives and breathes startup pitches every single day. And I'm super excited about this one, Brian Hollins, who is the founder and managing partner at Collide Capital, but has a resume that, Phoenix Fund, Black VC, just in general, talking to early stage founders, helping early stage teams from a variety of contexts. And I think a lot of those contexts I'm excited about you bringing to the stage. Do us a favor. You're going to do better than I. Brian, who are you? Give us a little bit of the wrapping.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Brian Hollins, founder at Collide Capital. I went to Stanford for undergrad. It's where I met innovation. I spent 6.5 years at Goldman Sachs as a software investor. I helped build a group at Goldman called the Emerging Entrepreneurs Coverage Group. My job was to go to Sand Hill Road and meet early stage entrepreneurs and figure out how to break them into the firm. Learned a lot about what I'd call the portfolio support or value add side of our job, and then wanted to get my hands dirty, figure out what underwriting looked like. So I joined a group called GS Growth Equity, invested off of Goldman's balance sheet in the merchant banking division for 2.5 years, wrote $30 to $75 million checks in businesses, typically doing about $10 to $15 million of ARR. I left Goldman in 2019, mostly because I just wanted to be more entrepreneurial. If any of you are familiar with DocSend, working at Goldman, you can't open a DocSend link. And so a ton of frustrations around just the lack of ability you had to be entrepreneurial or frankly to interact with the entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so I left the firm in 2019, went to Harvard Business School and spent 2 years at HBS working on the fund and working on the idea of the fund. In 2022, we raised Fund 1. We raised a $66 million fund anchored by the University of California Endowment System, a group called the UC Regents. And we've been investing out of that vehicle ever since. We focus on what we call business productivity software. So we invest in fintech infrastructure businesses, supply chain and logistics businesses. And then we have a thesis around Gen Z in the workforce. So what tools will Gen Z use when they become the majority of the workforce as opposed to millennials? We write a $750K check on average. We've done as small as $300K. We've done as large as $2.5 million. And super excited to see what kind of feedback we can share. We look at hundreds of companies a year. And so while I don't know what a perfect pitch is, I've heard a lot of good pitches. And so hopefully can leave a little bit of feedback that helps these guys and gals on their journey.
And you've heard a lot of bad pitches, I assume. That can sometimes be more instructive. Brian, the other thing you shared with me that I'd love for the crowd to hear about is you raising another fund.
Yeah.
And I think it's super interesting to hear from folks that you're not the first to be on stage while, kind of in the midst of raising a fund from LPs, the givers of money to venture capital. And that itself is a selling motion that has a lot of similarities, a lot of analogies to what startup founders have to do. What's the thing you're learning about pitching while you're on this journey?
Patience.
Yeah.
Patience. very similar to how I can feel when a founder needs money, LPs can feel when I need money or when a GP needs money. And so oftentimes my feedback to founders when they're coming to me is around building relationships authentically. And it sounds cliche, but really finding ways to go and meet people who could potentially give you money someday and interacting with them in a way outside of that. So I tell founders all the time, I'm a big golfer. Let's find a way to get on the golf course and just play golf and not talk about.
Do you play golf with people who are bad at playing golf?
Absolutely.
Then we're going to play some golf.
Yeah, there you go. But the same thing, I build relationships with LPs in that same mindset. The LPs I'm meeting today, I'm planning to close in fund 3, and that's 2.5, 3 years away, and so I think for some founders, it's hard to have that type of duration in terms of mindset, but it really is the best way, in my opinion, to start to figure out who you want to work with.
It reminds me of that Mark Suster line. I don't know if you've heard it. It's like I invest in lines, not dots.
Yes.
And it's so interesting, the visual that I remember that blog post was like a 2012 or 2013 sort of thing. And it was the idea that like, okay, I can meet you at a point in time.
Yep.
And I can try to be convinced by you to invest in you as a dot, but I've only met you once.
Yep.
But if I see you and I have multiple dots and I have a line, I have a sense of your progress, I have a sense of progression, what you've learned, what you've done, what you've achieved, it's much easier to invest in a line than a dot.
Yep. Mark's an LP.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
Mark, shout out Mark and the upfront team. That's absolutely right. And, I think another thing we just think about is iteration. One of my favorite skills of a founder is what I call horsepower, capacity. If I give you something to do and we talk a month later, I'm hoping that thing is so far off your list because you just got through it in a week. And sometimes you can tell between founders who have high horsepower and those who don't is how many things they can get through in a period of time, because I can promise you, at whatever your stage you're at in this type of environment, pre-seed, seed, you will not have less things on your plate when you're a Series B or Series C entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the benefits of having built a growth equity skill set is I spend time with founders who raised, $150 million and we're running 650, 700 person teams. And you really see their ability to get through tasks quickly. And I think, like Mark said, you can learn some things like that when you spend a few iterations with people. And
hopefully we're creating, kind of the moment of a line that's sloping up for some of these founders. So Brian, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Ready to kick this thing off?
Let's do it.
With a round of applause, everybody, let's welcome our first founder to stage. Tell us, what is your name?
Adoba.
Adoba, are you ready to give your minute pitch, kick us off, get some feedback?
Yeah, absolutely.
You are founder 1 of this episode, so go ahead, kick us off, Adoba. What are you building?
Yeah, so Panaptico. And so the idea for this is 74% of compute-intensive applications run on on-prem HPC clusters and supercomputers. And so these are critical workloads like life science and biotech, machine learning, manufacturing and engineering, and other workloads like that. They need to run on these superclusters and supercomputers because they need specialized environments and they're very workload intensive. So we built out Panaptico with the idea that, they're migrating these workloads to the cloud. So 86% of biotech companies plan to migrate their workloads to the cloud, but the software infrastructure layer is not there to support this. So we allow engineers, research scientists to run jobs, workloads, and tasks in a unified environment across several services like their PyTorch notebooks, Databricks, Azure Machine Learning, with the goal of just building out specialized applications.
Under a minute, well done. Maybe I'll kick us off with a question. I think I'm trying to discover a little bit about the product here, and I think very interesting setup from a cloud perspective. But maybe I'm not experiencing exactly the pain point that you're solving for the audience in biotech that you're talking about. And I also wonder if the audience definition is permanent, and if it's not, how much that might be shaping your pitch. So let's dive into the experience of it a little bit. Tell us more about the product.
Yeah, so
with the mic up.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for example, a biotech company is doing maybe drug discovery. So what this involves is thousands of jobs across different departments. The pipeline for creating this is, you might have data on disparate systems. It might be in Snowflake. It might be some Apache service, some ETL service. So what you want to do is sort of build this all together. So some jobs have dependencies on others. You might need data in some specific format. Might need this job to run at the specific time. You might need compute available at some specific time as well. So the idea of sort of having an infrastructure that manages like, building out the application, doing the drug discovery, is a problem for organizations that sort of run these workloads on-prem. That's why they run this on super clusters, HPC clusters that are specialized for you to be able to build these workloads. And so the main players are sort of like Slurm, IBM LFS. These are decade-old systems that are CLI platforms that run on these HPC clusters. But now that you're migrating to the cloud, you can't use those systems there anymore. And so we integrate with a lot of these services, ANSYS, Synopsys that are used for like mechanical engineering, for sort of building microchips, and things of that nature. We give you the infrastructure for your teams to have a unified place. And you can sort of think about this as like platforms like CI/CD platforms that allow developers to build out applications together, mitigate things like failure points, rollbacks, and things that were important and critical for you to actually like make your software work. And so we're doing these for these critical workloads, again, that like require a lot of compute, that require like a lot of specialized infrastructure, and saying, hey, if you do life sciences, if you do biotech, if you do these really complex systems that you can now run on Azure, you can get compute from like CoreWeave, Lambda Labs, Databricks, and all these other services. Now we'll build the software infrastructure for you to actually build out these services and workloads.
I have more questions, but
yeah.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about you.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about this minute, the opportunity for people to understand the why you, this problem, I'm familiar with the problem. It's a technical problem, but familiar with the problem. It didn't start yesterday. The problem has existed. So why you're the person that's going to solve it. And I think how you can weave that into your story is going to really help you develop a little bit more sort of the right to exist, the right to win with investors.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll answer that. So I actually have a lot of experience with Slurm. I went to one of the biggest medical colleges in Texas. So I built out their HPC clusters. It's a very specialized system. So you need like experience actually building this out. And once I sort of so I've spent like the past 4 months working with the team at Cloudflare, their accelerator program. We're one of 15 startups in there. And so I saw firsthand, a lot of the organizations that they had removing these services to the cloud. And I said, you can't run Slurm on this, on these like compute resources. You can't run Slurm on Databricks. You can't run Slurm on Snowflake. So there was sort of the opportunity there to meet like, organizations that are now getting compute on these services and say, hey, if you need like a management cluster, we will build it out for you. So I knew Slurm. I have experience building it. I also knew the weaknesses. It was founded maybe 40 years ago. It's run by Linux still. It's open source, so it's not commercialized. So I knew that firsthand and I saw the opportunity as well. So in my team, so we're a team of about 3. My co-founders came from Meta. They worked at the Air Force's cyber offensive team, built out the systems at IBM as well. So one of my co-founders was actually still worked at the IBM LFS Spectrum with Platform, which is for the on-prem HPC cluster. So I'm
going to ask the audience, raise your hand if you think you can tell us back on stage, don't worry, I won't put you on the spot, what his product does. All right, let's work on this. So define Slurm.
Okay, so Slurm is a job scheduler platform. So one of the issues that we solve is, you just got compute. You have like 300 A100 GPUs. Someone wants to run a Python notebook. They use a powerful GPU, and then it's been underutilized. You don't need Let's
work on this a little more correctly, so I'm going to interrupt you a lot. Yeah. When you're talking about a job being scheduled and someone wants to run a Python notebook, let's get practical. Someone has constant streams of some type of data that they want to run some sort of compute, AI, machine learning, data pipelining, application microservice on top of that data. And a job in this case is not the job that we might all have when we're employed. A job is a digital schedule. It's a running script, essentially. And people don't realize there are a lot of jobs behind the software that we all use, essentially queues of tasks that we program to run. Okay, so now let's get back into that example. So let's live in that example a little bit. So someone wants to run what on these A100s?
Yeah, so Python notebooks, they just want to get compute. And
No, not a Python notebook. Get more practical. What's on the Python notebook? What do they want out of it?
So the first thing is, okay, so let's do a different one. They want to do an image classification with Azure ML. They just select some compute. And the biggest problem that, a lot of with GPUs is underutilization. It's expensive, and it just reduces time to value that of your application you're building. So someone wants to do an image classification job, they select some compute. It's not as compute intensive as they need. So maybe they're only using 30% of the GPU. Now you might have someone else who wants to run a more complex job. Maybe it's more data intensive. There is no GPU available. Maybe they have to wait for that job to finish. And now you have sort of an issue of, so Slurm does static allocation. You just use whatever it's available, and that's it. We do dynamic allocation. You can use algorithms, or you can do something like backfilling. We can also detect like the type of workload the person is running and dynamically say, this is the GPU that
So I never want
you
you to say Slurm as part of your pitch unless you're like talking to someone who's subject matter expert. Instead, you have a very real and describable problem, right? It's essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, it's orchestration infrastructure for services running inside your organization, where essentially what you're doing is you're saying, hey, especially in certain industries, there's a lot of compute going on, and a lot of this has to do with using compute asynchronously, as in it's not in real time when someone's at their keyboard, it's instead in the form of scheduled jobs. And the great thing about a platform, what's it called again?
Panaptico.
The great thing about Panaptico is essentially we allow you to dynamically use that compute as opposed to in sequence or allow idling. And so if you have a large organization and a lot of people need this compute, they need access to graphics cards, they need access to CPUs, whatever it might be, we help orchestrate that these jobs and all of your resources are dynamically matched any given day, any given week, so that whenever you're spending money on compute, you're spending that money effectively. And you can mention, I like the word backfill for you too. Like it brings a real use case. Oh, that GPU is not being used, but I have someone in the organization who could use it. If only in that moment I could connect their need to use it and the fact I've already paid for it, right? Did I describe that generally well?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know how I notice how I use zero technical jargon, some of which I didn't know your technical jargon and some of which I'm just avoiding, right? Like you can describe an analogy, and don't worry, even if you're talking to a technical person, you should get more technical. And I'm like pseudo-technical, I assume it's similar here. Like we can have a pretty good conversation. Yet still, even for those folks who are more technical, you start with the narrative and the story, and over time you get into the technical details and lift that person into, essentially their questions will be more about like, okay, let me make sure that you can do it, versus either a semi-technical or non-technical person is gonna go, hold on, let me identify with you. And actually, even to your point, you mentioned Cloudflare and being in their program and other things after Brian prompted you. Your credibility increased a lot in that moment. But again, it's kind of the point of the thing behind what he's saying is we want to empathize with you and the problem you've identified and you are saying you've experienced yourself.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll add is think about the pain point for the buyer, right? And so the person who actually has to pay for this thing that you're going to come in and sell them, what exactly are they going to understand about it? It's probably not the person who's building it. It's probably not the person delivering it. It's probably not the person who actually feels the pain point on a day-to-day basis. What are the ways that you can help zoom them out and understand why this is an efficiency for their business that you're solving? Because I think, to Sherveen's point, if someone wants to get technical with you, it's clear that you can rabbit hole with them. And I think that's going to be phenomenal for you as you get into the later stages with investors. But in the beginning, I think making sure that they understand how acute of a pain point this is going to be something that I'd encourage you to continue to solve.
I just want to add something to that too. You immediately come off as trustworthy. There are people who come off as trustworthy when they're talking about their product and their business. And one of the things to take advantage of in that moment is you want to live in places where I'm just going to follow you, right? Versus get lost in like, oh, he's telling me things, I believe him, but hold on, do I even grok what's going on? And so just think about the fact that like from a narrative standpoint, especially if you do establish some of that credibility up front, you'll do really well in essentially allowing somebody to tune in. They're not going to be skeptical that you haven't found something or you're trying to shill something. Instead, it's going to be, let me try to understand it with him. A question for you too, just to like evolve on the storytelling portion of this. How far along are you today?
So we've raised from a few VC firms. Again, so Cloudflare, the Accelerator program is actually a fund around $2.5 billion. So we're one of 15 startups there. We do have a few people, mostly research institutions. And the sell for them is just, if you're going to move to the cloud, this is just a service that you use. We do a lot more than Slurm does. We have a UI platform. It's not a CLI.
It's launched.
So in sort of an alpha stage.
And are these design partners essentially, these clients?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
I'd say like making that also a package statement, either at the end of your minute pitch or right afterwards, because essentially the next questions that I have is, how complicated is this to build?
Yeah.
What does that design stage
Who's
look
paying
like
for
with
it?
these people? Who's paying for it today? Especially there's compute, by the way, there's spend. No matter what, there's going to be spend on the side of the customer, even alongside your product. And so understanding the like, what economics do you add? Now, you're going to say, we add economics because they pay us, but by the way, we also make their bills X, Y, Z cheaper. So getting to that story, even if you're still early, it's like, hey, we're in design partner stage or alpha stage, and making that really known to the other side.
Okay. And so sort of what we're trying to do is do a lot of partnerships. For example, Databricks, where very complex systems like oil and gas, building out KYC workflows and things, and saying, hey, this is something your entire organization can work on. Do you need data from like BigQuery, Snowflake? How do you orchestrate the entire thing? So it's basically, how do you build out your application? Let's say you want to build out a new model. How do you orchestrate everything that has to happen and just ensure it's almost like DevOps, really, again, for these complex systems. And I go back to Circle CI and what they did for, if you want to build out like a software product, you use sort of these.
One of the things, by the way, this is like feedback that I'm realizing I have for a lot of technical founders who've gotten on this stage. They'll refer to Circle CI, which is more like a testing integration platform, but they'll say things like to build software products. Remember, most people don't know what Circle CI does. And so if you just say to build software products, it's like, okay, that to someone who doesn't know what Circle CI does, like, what does that mean exactly? And then, just kind of like bring some of that to life.
I think in your fundraising journey over the next 10 years, because by the way, you will be raising for the next 10 years, if this works, your struggle will be the balance between starting technical and going technical. And I would encourage you as often as possible to start not technical and go technical, because it is very clear to me you can go as technical as anyone wants to. But oftentimes you're going to lose people so early that you're not going to get the shot that you deserve.
Which is oftentimes about them, by the way, right? It's like the VC not knowing
that's
and
not your
wanting
fault,
to,
right? But there's most likely a firm that was a perfect fit for you. You met the person at the firm that wasn't the perfect fit for you. You lost them, so they didn't bring it back to the firm and to the person that was the perfect fit, so that you could go technical with that person. So that's one piece. The second piece I'd say is, it's clear to me you're kind of selling this horizontally right now. And I'd really I would encourage you to think about what industry needs this the most right now. Can you find an ICP, an ideal customer profile for the business right now? Because it sounds like there's a biotech motion, there's an oil and gas motion. It sounds like right now you're thinking about just selling it to everyone. And if you solve a problem for everyone, you solve nothing for anyone, and just really think about, could we get 5 or 6 design partners that look and smell roughly the same, so that I can start to drive towards revenue traction, which will then again allow you to kind of accelerate the business.
You'll still be able to tell a story, by the way, of getting to those other industries right after you mention, hey, here's where I'm starting. And then we plan.
That's your Series A and B raise, right? Like, hey, we have 17 customers in oil and gas, and biotech is dying for us to come over here. Here's $10 million to go put fuel in the fire. That's an easy motion. So just think about what's an area where either I know a bunch of people, my co-founders know a bunch of people, where we can start with some customers who really believe in what we're doing and understand the pain point.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I do love a good technical founder that gets lost in the technical details, because that's much more workable and you can see that person's path much more than the person you're like, do you even understand what you're building?
Deeply understands what he's building. And look, at the end of the day, that is the challenge. I say this a lot. You are running a triathlon as a founder, right? And you have an investor race, you have a customer race, and you have a employee race. And sometimes it's easy to run your customer race, and it's easy to think about how you're going to build your team of all these technical people. You still have to run an investor race, and not every investor is as technical as you want them to be. And so spending time really uncovering the business and understanding, how can I make this easy and digestible for people who frankly could absolutely fund this and could absolutely put us in the right place to win, but might not understand it as technically as I do today, is a challenge that technical founders face. And we have them across our portfolio. And so we guide them a lot through this. And frankly, I think your program and this type of work is perfect for that type of founder.
I appreciate that. And just to add to that too, I think a lot of those founders shouldn't take that portion personally. One of the things I think about VCs is like they're often not incentivized to ask questions. It's easier to say no to a pitch you don't understand than to feel like I have to drag it out of the founder. And so that's why I love your point about, did you meet the right partner at the firm? you have to have some optionality as a founder to decide, so hopefully you're that lucky. But once you can decide, or at least be smart about routing yourself, routing yourself can be literally the difference between life and death, or a huge round and a small round. But not a lot of founders get that.
You got to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
The same with LPs, right? I don't get to decide necessarily if I'm meeting the decision maker or the person who started 2 months ago, but I need to meet them where they are, and over time, I'll get to the right people if it makes sense.
Totally. All right. Well, with that, shall we go to the next founder?
Let's do it.
Round of applause, founder 2. What's your name?
I'm Chai, short for Chaitanya.
Say your
C-H-A-I.
name, first name.
So C-H-A-I, like Chai, short for Chaitanya. Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Are you ready to give us your minute pitch and get some feedback?
Yeah. Can I put a timer on there?
We've got a timer for you. It's going to turn orange behind him when you have 10 seconds left.
Cool.
And then red when we're done.
Sounds good. All right. So I'll start, I guess. I'm the founder of TalentLex. My co-founder is in San Francisco. I'm a UK law graduate, and I essentially started out building an AI startup that allowed legal recruiters to screen applications more efficiently in the UK. When I was a law student, I basically never got feedback at the written stage. And in our process to get into law firms like Goodwin, Cooley, all of which I go through, it's all unstructured data that's very different to CVs. So I started out building like a low-code tool that got 500 users in a few days. And then we sort of iterated and produced a tool with recruiters reaching out and trying to shut us down, but realizing that they wanted something similar to just help them screen applications more efficiently. So that's sort of what we're doing right now, raising a pre-seed. Because my co-founder and I met in San Francisco at GitHub, funnily enough. And yeah, we've just been iterating ever since.
All right, under a minute. Applause.
Awesome. We got to slow down.
Yeah.
We got to slow down. I mean, you had 14 seconds left, 16 seconds left, and on a minute, that's 25% of your time, So two things. One, I think you'd slow down. Two is think about what else you could have uncovered in that minute. What are the things, if the business is this early, maybe it's more about how you and your co-founder got together. Maybe it's more about your skill set relative to your co-founder's skill set. What's complementary about the two of you coming together? I said this to the last founder, sort of the why you, right? You're not the first person to build AI for the legal industry. So why are the two of you the perfect team to build it? So thinking about just slowing down a little bit and uncovering some of those things while you still have the time, I think will benefit you a lot.
For me, I think it's a really interesting problem because it sounds like it's centered in recruiting, right?
Legal recruiting in the UK, so it's pretty niche, yeah.
Yeah. Is it always going to be that niche?
Well, I mean, in terms of horizontally, it'll be niche in like law schools in the US have the same problem. So the horizontal will be pretty niche.
So, but it will be, because I guess you could go legal recruiting, or you could say, hey, it's recruiting and other industries share some of these problems. It'll be a recruiting thing aimed at some niches.
So because we're pretty early, we're sort of figuring out whether we're going to stick by the horizontal and stick with legal recruiting or any other area where there's unstructured data that needs to be reviewed. So like
what's the UX innovation there? Describe it. I'm in the space as the founder of agency, so I'm asking this somewhat because I know a little bit about what's possible and that jazz, but describe a little bit more about what's the practical innovation for the people who are going to buy your product.
Yeah, I'll try to sort of describe it because it probably would have been easier with the demo. But essentially, as a law student, you submit applications that are, let's say, 300, 400 words long. You don't receive any feedback. And as a recruiter, you manually parse through them in the UK. But now it's sort of possible to fine-tune our own model using a RAG pipeline to basically like provide any feedback based off of what the firm's criteria is. We did that for some firms, and because it worked for me in my last year of university there at LSE, we deployed it, and then like hundreds of users started using it. So from their perspective, they sort of put in an application and get an output out of it. That is the feedback. We recently launched a feature that allows them to draft an application too by basically putting their own points, and it's been fine-tuned on the firm's own criteria, like their own applications.
Why is this specific to either legal in the UK or in general as you move on? Essentially what you're saying is there's this screening motion where people could appreciate feedback. I could imagine everybody in the world wanting that for job applications, school applications. So, why are you deep in this industry?
So with this niche, there are a lot of objective things and applications that are to do with writing concisely that aren't present in other industries. So we don't have the concept of a CV. We basically just have a bunch of essay questions. It's when I mentioned the horizontals before, the same horizontal, we were looking at like government grant applications, for example. It's sort of the same issue there. With respect to feedback, it's more so just allowing recruiters to screen them more efficiently, because like if they, at the top of their stack, send out more interviews and more rejections quicker, it's sort of a win-win for everyone. So after getting like all the users I mentioned, we're sort of pivoting into more B2B right now, speaking with recruiters like Deckard, Goodwin, and a bunch of other US firms.
Again, I go back to sort of competitive environment that you're going to run into as a pre-seed right now. You're going to be limited in resource. It's going to be massively competitive. Maybe walk me through some of kind of why what you guys are building is so explicit and why some of the existing kind of recruiting channels and recruiting tech-focused ecosystems aren't going to be able to build it?
So, a couple of things. There is only one provider in the UK that allows firms to basically host their data, but they don't do anything even remotely related to AI. Essentially, what this isn't a recruitment tool that's a one-size-fits all. It's more just for legal. So just nothing like this exists, basically. In the UK, I sort of graduated and I realized all these objective things I'm talking about. I use ChatGPT and sort of just learn how to prompt engineer my way to getting through. And I just realized because the UK is so behind, when we deployed it to the public, everyone sort of used it. So that's where the fine-tuning came in, because we could fine-tune our own model. And because we've already sort of had a head start, it would be difficult to get the same data that we have got through our users. Yeah.
What's the name of the company again?
TalentLex.
TalentLex.
Yeah.
Can I pitch Brian TalentLex?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Can I pitch you TalentLex?
Let's do it.
So we're building TalentLex. And the challenge to understand, we're starting in legal recruiting, but the challenge to understand with certain forms of niche recruiting is there's a lot of unstructured data, but with objective outcomes. Take medicine, take law, take other professions where essentially there's a lot that either a school will want to know, a firm will want to know, especially about early grads or people in their early career, where things like essays, things like reports from your professor, and other unstructured data, I don't know whether they're unstructured data, are a huge part of the analysis. And so for individuals, for the job or school seekers in this moment, there's a lot of work to do to structure that unstructured data. And for the recruiters on the other side, and in particular, in my experience applying to big law firms, they've got a lot of sorting to do on that unstructured data. They receive a lot of applications. There's a lot to go through. And the decisions they're making are still objective. There are rules that they apply. And so we really see an opportunity to apply AI in this use case for these firms that have to have a lot of unstructured data, but still make objective decisions. So if you're a legal firm and you're receiving thousands of applications every single year and you have recruiters overwhelmed, you can essentially run our program to screen all of this unstructured data, make the objective choices for you. It still lets you make subjective choices on top, so there's still some human in the loop to recruiting, which everyone's sensitive about. And then even better, for the applicants in this scenario, even the ones who are rejected, they get that objective feedback. So again, when it's subjective, we still leave that to recruiters to do what recruiters and job seekers do. But when it's objective, our AI allows everybody to benefit from efficiency gains and gives the applicant the feedback they need to move forward in their search as well. I think I still want to tweak, because you went B2B and I still went B2B2C, and I think that's actually wrong. Yeah. But the thing I'm trying to do there is define a little bit more this unstructured data thing. That's what's interesting. I still have questions as to whether it'll stay competitive as foundational models improve.
No, when foundational models improve, that benefits us, because when I started out without code, just using API codes, I just used the latest providers, but now we're realizing security is a big thing. So actually, as for example, Llama 3.1, if we can run models locally and download them and really make it secure, that's actually plays to our benefit. So we're not competing in the foundational model space like that.
You're almost an amazing answer here. We hear a lot of this because there are a lot of people who are building on top of these models. Go a little bit further. Okay. You might say something like, we're going to integrate with the recruiting platforms. We're going to provide security, auth, privacy. We won't be competing on. I'll upgrade. I'll just slot the API key in whenever there's a foundational model upgrade. But what I'm doing differently than OpenAI or Anthropic will care about is I'm deeply integrating into recruiting workflows, legal workflows, privacy workflows. You mentioned in the UK, there's this whole, I don't know if you meant it because there's a regulation, but where the data sits is also interesting. Yeah.
I felt the pain points slightly more when you did it. I still don't feel it heavy enough.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a pitch thing versus this might be a product problem. That doesn't mean you can't build it, but that's I think a thing.
And again, it's I put my legal tech hat on. It's a really tough bucket in general. They're a bad buyer. They tend to churn. ACV is not as high as you think. And so I really would think about, what are they spending money on today, and how are you going to avert wallet share away from those existing tools towards what you're talking about? Because the reality is, the majority of costs inside of a legal firm is headcount. And the likelihood that you introduce a tool that cuts headcount by 15% is very low. So this is already a complementary tool, right? It's something that makes the people in recruiting better at their job, happier in their job, more likely to stay. How are you going to convince the buyer that this is something that's valuable for them?
Which is legal firm, which goes to my question though, why not? And go more
outside of it.
Vertical or horizontal. We actually just had that conversation with the other founder, but like,
I actually like that part. I'm on the other side of you on that. I sort of like how specific you are about where you're starting. I would go a step further and explain why this is the biggest problem in Europe, and why is that, like, yeah, we could do this in the US or we could do it in Asia, but like this is such a problem in Europe, and here's why we're starting there. And you know, we'll get to a certain stage, and all of a sudden we'll have data moat, and that'll allow us to go into different ecosystems. But I would think a little bit deeper about why that challenge resonates so much with the European buyer.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
With respect to like the horizontal, so I'm debating between sticking with the UK niche, and then like when you convince VCs that you got to go abroad and so on, or like making it super niche but looking at like a 5-10 year span kind of thing. Because I obviously study in the UK, so I'm just sort of battling between whether to really focus in on that niche issue in the UK or just like start thinking about all the other countries now. I mean, I think you kind of answered
my question that it's not as big of a Europe problem as anywhere. So if it's not really that problem, then I would think about where you have competitive advantage.
Okay.
Right.
Well, can I tap onto something he said earlier when he said he doesn't feel it as a big problem? Look, you're talking to two people who want to empathize with your problem as much as possible. And the fact we don't find it as a problem is a big problem for you to get introspective about.
Sorry. I think I should probably clarify. It's like a big problem for me, but others might not find the same, like it as much of a pain point.
No, but I think that's my point is like, you have to decide, like, I think you should make a big change, right? You should either go all in on like what Brian's suggesting is to like, okay, understand your legal tech buyer or UK far more, but then come and say, there was a founder who was on stage the other week talking about how in Germany and parts of the EU, there are regulations coming for SMBs and how they spend on energy. He's like, they have no idea how they're going to actually be compliant with all these regulations. Fines are coming in storm for all these European SMBs. We're going to put little plugs on the walls so that they can actually measure the power usage and adapt their power usage. But it felt big when he was like, the EU has this huge regulation. SMBs are set up for fines. Blah, 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 blah. That's the Europe story. Your legal tech story could be, I'm making this one up because I don't think it's true, but let's imagine it's true just so that I have another thing to go for. Legal tech recruiting is so friggin' hard because there are only 3 systems that anyone is allowed to use for the sake of some regulation or privacy to receive legal applications, law school records, unstructured data about that person. And we have an innovation as to how we're going to pipeline that data to allow a recruiter to make a different choice than they make today. But you see how both of those it sounds like a bigger problem. Today, it sounds like you said, hey, legal tech is kind of hard and RAG is kind of cool. And I've combined those two thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so take that and say, I'm going to shake that up into a much bigger problem and a much bigger sounding problem, regardless of, because you asked that question of like the story to VCs. Yeah. The VC is not going to love this mushing of 5 small kind of problems. They want to hear one big, juicy, where is legal tech spending their money? Why is Europe legal tech hard? Yeah. Why is recruiting hard? Whatever it might be, one of those, and here's my big swing at a solution.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Sort of why now, right?
Yeah.
Recruiting's been hard for a really long time. Outside of the fact that the technology has arrived today, can you give some other reason or explanation why they're going to start paying for that now? Think a little bit about that as well.
Cool. And the answer can't be because the technology's here.
That's
it
what
has
I mean.
to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, it's good. Again, whether it's regulatory, whether it's something that's coming that they didn't think about, whether it's that 3x the number of apps are going to start coming through because schools have changed something. Just a little bit of like, they're going to start paying for this in 6 months, and we're going to be the only player that has a tool ready for them.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for sharing.
Good luck.
Brian, for this one, I want to talk about your sweater. It's awesome. It is so subtle. And I was telling you earlier, for agency, we have subtle swag as well. I would wear that. Can I get one?
We can absolutely get you one.
Fantastic. Yeah. What was your thinking just building such a swagalicious sweater?
Swagalicious. I like that. Our senior associate on our team is here as well, who has one. I grew up playing sports.
Yeah.
My younger brother plays football. He plays for the Buffalo Bills. If there's any NFL fans in here, I see one in the back. And so we grew up wearing team clothes, and so I take a lot of pride in the team that we're building. And I think you should get to wear swag that represents the team and that you feel excited to wear and that you enjoy. And so I probably built about 4 or 5 renditions of this and wore it around myself for a little while and figured out which one I liked the most. And this one to me represents sort of a streetwear brand in New York and very much aligns with, exactly, it feels like New York, right? It's established in New York, 2022. That's the year our firm was built. And so for founders, I think they can empathize with our journey, which is also that it's new, also that it's not corporate, and that's the brand that we try to share with founders.
Swag can be so much more than just a logo on a shirt, and that was a perfect example of how to think about it. All right, Brian, shall we welcome the next founder stage?
Let's do it.
Round of applause. What's your name again?
Francisco.
Francisco, are you ready to give your minute pitch, get some feedback?
Not at all.
It's still time, so I will invite you still. You have a minute. What are you building?
Yeah, just kidding. I'm building Coompass, platform that engages with big companies and their workforce to achieve sustainability and KPI goals annually, using skill-based volunteering with their workforce. We do this by gamifying the participation of the workforce from the companies, using a token reward system and blockchain. It is on top of blockchain to record the sustainability KPIs. And essentially, this is it. This is the right timing in Europe. I forgot to say that it's a Portuguese company, because it started this year, new directives from the European Union saying that it is mandatory to report annually sustainability activities. And we came up with this solution and idea on top of the blockchain, using a token mechanism.
That's about a minute. Round of applause. Can I start with just like this? Have you ever been to a fragrancy event before?
Sorry,
have you ever been to an event here?
No. It's the first time.
So a reputation I have amongst the small people who know me. I am the biggest anti-Web3 blockchain. It's not just like I have a skepticism. I promote actively against it. I still love the founders who get on stage who are pitching it in terms of everything else. But why is blockchain part of it? I get there's a token, so blockchain is a nice way to distribute it. It goes between employers maybe is probably something you're going to say, but that could be built outside of blockchain. Let's just get that out of the way, then we can talk about everything else. Why is blockchain a part of the solution? Yeah,
we did a research last year. We started building this solution this year, and we did a research with big companies in Portugal, and we came up with 3 challenges that companies had to engage employees in volunteering activities, and those were no incentivization, that people had no incentives to do within the company. Why do within the company and not outside the company? And another 2, these activities for volunteering, it was always based on the C-level. So the corporate and the directors dictate, we are planting 100 trees in another city, and people need to go there, even if they don't feel they belong
Why
there.
Blockchain?
The blockchain, essentially because of its security and the immutability of...
So no reason?
No, that's the reason.
Security, couldn't you provide security as a central software builder?
No, essentially the immutability of
Why is it
those recordings.
To be immutable?
It is important, essentially, to understand if it's a possibility and if it really results in a positive way.
How will blockchain allow that to be verified?
Yeah, it is. It is auditable
But
in real time.
Couldn't you, as Coompass, be the one to verify and audit instead, centrally?
We essentially we've built this solution to help companies, not in a compliance way, just to help them to achieve goals in sustainability activities. So, by meaning within the blockchain, is to have everything on a smart contract, auditable in real time to anyone to see if it's happening or not.
I'll and not to add, if I was in love with the rest of your idea, but then you said blockchain, I'd go, great, I don't love your idea at all. And the question I'd ask myself as a founder in 2024, when Web3 has taken a stigma on, it's mostly not liked by investors and technologists anymore, except people who are in the niche. I'd ask myself as a founder, do I need that to be part of my story? If I have a great idea otherwise, if helping companies reward their employees for these sorts of activities and helping employees feel rewarded for these activities is an important mission, will my mission be better served by me achieving the same things that are going on with blockchain without it? And there is nothing you've said so far, and I believe is the Web3 person, there's nothing you could say that you couldn't achieve centrally as Coompass outside the blockchain. I'll leave it at that and I'll stop the Web3 stuff.
You either have to answer his question before he asks it around why the blockchain needs to exist, because I agree that I didn't fully understand why it needs to be there. But the second for me is help me understand why there's a higher likelihood as an investor that those large corporations are going to adopt your technology with blockchain, right? And so I actually don't personally believe, one, that they care about those sustainability efforts, regardless of the rolling out, unfortunately. But I think that that's just the first part. But two, I certainly don't think that on top of caring, they care about the immutability of it or care about taking it another step and figuring out exactly where it comes from and sort of some of the benefits of the blockchain. So I think you need to think about how you're going to prove out this design piece with a handful of companies or corporations where they actually can demonstrate for you why this wasn't possible with traditional technology and needed to live in a Web3 kind of instance. Because what I heard was a great opportunity to sell to Fortune 500 in Europe. And I don't know a single Fortune 500 in Europe that's buying blockchain technology right now.
Yeah,
right.
You're correct.
And by the way, I will say this is like now going back to the pitch and away from the blockchain stuff. That was the interesting setup that should have happened at like your first 4 or 5 sentences. That there's regulation coming, that there's mandatory reporting coming. Because up until that point, it sounded like a nice to have that I could imagine some Fortune 500s caring about as part of their desire to just like write something that they did. Okay, fine, we bought this piece of software. But when you add regulation to the story and you say, hey, there's mandatory reporting to the story, who's going to do that reporting? Well, they have to pay people. How is it going to be audited? How is it going to be standardized? How are you going to get employees to actually actively engage in it? Now it sounds like a huge logistics and operations pain point that Coompass can solve.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about, often in sort of these B2B moments, the optionality, and you've been mentioning this a few different times, the optionality to the buyer, the more you can remove the optionality, right? You have to say they have to buy something, and then you're the solution, you're one of the solutions they can buy, the better that your pitch will do. So again, remove the optionality. They can't not buy something, or they have to pay internally to solve this problem otherwise.
I also want to go back to one piece for we got, we blockchain rabbit holed a little bit, but I don't personally believe that gamifying and incentivizing volunteering works. What I mean by that is I think you either volunteer or don't out of the kindness of your heart. And I think telling me I'm either going to make $6 or I'm going to get an extra half a day off, I think I would really think about how you're going to encourage buyers to believe that this is going to change a behavior inside of their organization and that gamifying volunteerism will increase utilization or increase the likelihood that people are participating. Because I'm trying to think, I spent 7 years at Goldman Sachs. I volunteered because I felt like it was important to do, right? And so I'm thinking, how many of my peers weren't volunteering because they didn't make money or weren't volunteer, and so just thinking about, I'd encourage you to think about how you can get companies to believe that you're going to change a behavior as a result of this gamification piece, because otherwise I think you're just gamifying for the sake of gamifying. What are the ways that you're actually going to change behavior within the organization?
Which, by the way, you don't need to be certain about, right? Like, I think the thing I'm thinking about when you say that is you're going to say something like the people who, because the other answer to his objection there could be, you're right, but those people do even more when they feel rewarded and recognized, right? And so suddenly you don't have to convince them necessarily, oh, we're going to convince more of your employees to do it. We're going to convince the ones who do it to do it more, to proliferate, to socialize about it. And that'll, also lead into your points about reporting. I think you do need to, as part of your pitch, because this feels like an optional product, talk about the reporting pieces of, well, by the way, here's like the end result of using Coompass is at the end of every year when the audit comes in or you have to file your taxes or whatever else the mechanism is, here's the thing that we spit out for our clients and our companies that makes that one click versus what otherwise is going to be 5 lawyers, spending all day.
Sure.
I couldn't exactly tell if the ROI was retention of employees, NPS of employees, or cost savings because of the regulatory requirements that they were going to miss. And so just thinking about, what problem are you solving on day one? And there might be complementary synergies and benefits to the buyer, but on day one, when you go in to sell them and you're asking them to sign a $50K ACV deal, what's the ROI that they're going to get immediately?
The big challenge at least right now in Portugal, is, for instance, in average, companies pay 8 hours of volunteering per year, and the people do at least one. So this would be one of the ROIs.
Sorry, explain that again. They pay.
Yeah, they give a free day, for
Days
instance, 8 hours off.
But employees only take one on average.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So in Portugal, the average company says, here's 8 days, do whatever volunteer work you want. But
And they do less than 1 hour. Yeah.
1 hour?
1 hour per year. Yes.
On average?
Yeah,
employees.
on average. Yeah.
Sorry, so you're telling me that's huge.
No, it's terrible.
8 days of volunteer, I don't need to be at work.
8 hours.
Oh, 8 hours.
8 hours. Yeah.
That's still good, but for a second there, I was like, wow, that's really crazy.
You don't get 8 days of volunteer. You get eight out. They pay for 8 hours
Got it,
worth.
got it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't hear that big of a pain point.
Okay.
I mean, those employees are still there, right? They're not firing them for only doing an hour.
No.
Those employees aren't leaving because they didn't do their other 7 hours, And so I would just think about that pain point a little bit more.
Okay.
How can you get deeper?
Yeah, what we believe is that the timing is perfect for the ESG narrative, that everything is now mandatory for big companies, and next year it will be for everyone. And we built this solution to help companies to achieve these goals for sustainability activities. And we thought, companies are big, they have their workforce that don't do the volunteer work. Why not engage them to do this volunteer work and try to use essentially blockchain technology for this gamification? I know.
Don't let him decide whether or not you use it.
No,
but
he won't.
make sure.
But deeply think about it.
But make sure that you really understand why it needs to exist.
Yeah.
Because again, what I just heard is you're not going to, Johnny's pizza shop. You're going to large corporation. They're not adopting blockchain technology right now.
Yeah.
Right?
No, they don't know.
Well, so why are you going to be the first to make them know?
A lot of people have tried to make them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so you're sort of you're battling with two like taboo words at a Fortune 500: ESG, sustainability, and blockchain. And you're like, one's not hard enough. I'm going to throw both at you at the same time. It's like think a little bit.
I totally
about,
understand what your guys saying.
Yeah, just make sure that you really understand the pain point that you're solving for them and how they're going to adopt the technology.
Okay.
But it sounds like the mission is going to be good for the world. So good luck.
Yeah. Thank you guys for
Good
the
luck.
opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my biggest thing to founders now. I often do try to convince them on Web3 in general. But my other point to them is also just decide if your concept can live without it. Because if it's true that your concept can live without it, there are several founders where I go, I actually like what you're building, except that part.
Yeah.
And in 2024, don't make me have that feeling. Allow me to root for your journey.
No, there's applications for the technology, and
Can you list them? No, I'm just kidding.
well, there's it's certainly not being adopted in the enterprise, and certainly not being adopted in the large scale kind of Fortune 500 enterprise. And so
I'll share the one founder who did this that I actually really appreciate his pitch. This is like the third shout I've given him when I talk about the one founder who pitched a blockchain company, and I was like, I can kind of get it. It's called Blaze, and it's a payments app where he's using USDC, and I don't remember why he's using USDC because I don't care. But the point was, it's Venmo, but international. And so you can do the money transfer stuff like you would on Venmo, peer-to-peer. He's using USDC in the background to probably avoid fees and to make it faster, blah, 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 blah. But all of his pitch was about it's Venmo, but international. And so if you're traveling abroad, if you're living abroad, whatever else it might be, here are a bunch of barriers to people spending money on each other, and we make it easy. Now, I had a bunch of regulatory questions as to whether USDC is a good idea, whether international payments and blockchain is something morally and ethically and philosophically we should all opt into, whether the notion of government and libertarianism is at play. But I liked the pitch broadly. I go, okay, take the politics aside for a second. I could get why if that works,
this is needed.
Yeah.
A lot of remittances businesses, a lot of cross-border payments. I like that one as little as you like the other ones.
Interesting. We'll get into it at a different time.
Shout out to that founder, though. I'm sure that you. I think I'll just add this before the next one. You have to have a blind optimism to build a business, and I think if you're building a company that everyone agrees with you should exist, you're probably not building meaningful enough of a company. And
totally.
I think you should get, if you do 10 investor pitches, if 2 of them don't immediately shake their head and say, absolutely not, this doesn't make any sense, I think you should really just wonder if you're building beta instead of alpha.
Totally.
You know? And so I think sometimes I encourage founders to take advice like yours and throw it in the trash and keep building, you know? And so
prove them wrong.
Prove them wrong. You know, there's a lot of people that told us we couldn't build a fund. I'm sure there's plenty of people that told you you'd never have this stage or the businesses you're building. And so you have to have some blind optimism to do what these founders do. So I encourage all of them, if that's really what you want to do, go do the damn thing.
Trying to change the way the Earth spins, that is not easy.
Not easy.
With that, let's welcome the next Earth spinning changer.
Cool.
You said Sturgis?
Sturgis, yeah. It's a bit difficult. It's a Greek name, so feel free to ask me again.
I'm Shervin, so I totally get it. Brian, it's a hard name too. Sturgis, are you ready to give your minute pitch, get some feedback?
If you're ready, I'm ready.
Ready, go ahead.
Okay, so imagine you want to buy new shoes. You walk into a store, you spot a style you like and ask to try it on. Then the salesperson comes back with 11 boxes of the same shoe, all in different sizes. And it's up to you, the customer, to figure out which one is the right one for you. So, wouldn't make any sense, right? But over 130 million Americans who are on special diet have to go through that process every time they dine out. And we want to change that with Flavor app, where you can plan your next dinner without the noise, while offering restaurants with e-commerce level insights so they can discover why people choose them and why not. And if you're watching this at home, we just launched our crowdfunding campaign on WeFunder. You can learn more at wefunder.com/Flavor app. Thanks.
All right, under a minute. I got confused when we switched the analogy over to the business. I thought we were going to have some sort of commerce company around shoes.
Okay.
Can we explore that analogy for a second, just so it might give me more understanding?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So essentially, there are people that they're not everyone. That's why I'm bringing up this analogy, that they struggle to find the right option for them, and they have to go through sifting through the options, essentially.
If I have a really big shoe size, I'm not often going to be served.
No, it's not exactly like that. So, for example, the analogy I gave is, let's say you point at the shoe, and then instead of bringing you like number 12, they bring you all the sizes, and it's up to you to figure out which one is the right one, right? So you have to go through that instead of
this is a world that doesn't exist.
Yes, that's why I'm saying it wouldn't make sense. That's why obviously we don't have that.
Is this at home when I'm on DoorDash? Is this when I'm in a restaurant looking at a menu? It's
essentially when you want to go out, instead of going through multiple apps in this case and going, let's say, on Instagram or TikTok and trying to figure out, what you should try, and then move to Yelp, figure out if it's next to you, and then so on and so forth. And then you go to the restaurant, pay, split the bill, etc. In this case, we have a single experience from discovery to payment that is hyper-personalized to you. So instead of going, let's say, to Google Maps and seeing all these pins that you have no clue if they have something for you, because maybe you're vegetarian or maybe you're diabetic or whatever reason you cannot eat everything, we sort things out for you. So whatever you see, it's essentially something that you will like.
And are you integrating to help me get the reservation as well, or?
Yeah, so essentially we have our own engine. We also integrate. However, some partners that want to do now a pilot, they see a lot of value in that, because if, let's say, I'm a restaurant and I know on Friday night I have mostly pescatarians and vegetarians, then I'm not going to unfreeze and prepare a lot of meat. So I can cater to the needs of this particular diners that they're coming later tonight, and I can save a lot of money on that. So they prefer that over open table that doesn't give them this insight.
It's very different than the consumer pitch in a way that troubles me. I don't know that you should have both.
Yeah, I can, if you like, I can, sorry for interrupting you, but yeah, essentially we solve, let's say, 3 problems that they work together. So that's why I'm usually picking one, just to pick some interest when it comes to 1 minute pitch. So one is the personalization aspect, that now we have so many apps, but we don't have a personalized experience. And the other one is that you have to go through multiple apps instead of having just one, like going on Amazon.com that you can discover, put in your basket, shop, that's it. You don't have to hop through different providers. Then when it comes to the restaurant side, because we have this end-to-end experience, like in e-commerce, that you can tell when somebody bounces, for example, why they didn't shop at your e-commerce website, we can do the same with the restaurants. We can tell them someone looked at your menu, at your pizza, but then they ate pizza across the street. Something you cannot tell now with OpenTable because they don't have the payment function, for example. So you don't know where you eventually go. So then they can, close the loop and say, oh, you look at that, but then you buy there. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. Okay, here's my pitch version of feedback, and then I'm reading concept feedback. On the pitch side, I think you should centralize your 3 stories and say there's a hidden market dynamic of like what people produce, what people want to eat, and how they can access those items. And we're solving these 3 problems in this way. And I think starting that way means that you don't have to tell 3 sequential stories because one by itself won't hold up. So I think you need to establish all 3 sides of your die, so to speak. My concept feedback is they feel like 3 small problems that you are conjoining to try to create a bigger solution, right? You're saying, hey, here are 3 things that then combine into something that's bigger. Because I go, what about filters? And you might say, well, the restaurant doesn't know about how you're using the filters. And I can get that. In an ideal world, should that already exist and be the way the world works? Maybe. Do I think diners are going to change their behavior and restaurants are going to change their behavior because there's some fidelity to filters? Probably not. That's kind of where I'm at, right? I feel a little bit lukewarm.
Okay, if we can share a few thoughts on that, if that's okay. Essentially, when it comes to the consumer experience, what we've seen from our pilot and demos, etc., is that people love the app. So essentially now, a lot of people in the US, they start their journey on TikTok. Actually, it overtook Google for restaurant and meal discovery. But then, to action upon what they saw, they have to move in a different app, like on Yelp, see if it's available, if it's nearby, then move to OpenTable or Resi, and so on and so forth. When they see that their feed of videos, they're essentially localized and personalized to their preferences, then it's just easier what they do already. So that's why we believe, people want to use it.
Are you fully integrated, or are you building?
No, we make our own videos for restaurants. So it's a consistent experience also on the video. We build a robot that we do that very effectively.
A robot?
Yeah.
For the videos?
For the videos, yeah. Essentially what we found out in the initial talks we had with the restaurants is even the ones who could afford making videos, or if they were okay, with making videos in general, they couldn't shut down operations for, let's say, 9 hours, have a videographer, have a setup. Is
this another startup, though?
No, it's something I actually built for another company in the past, and I replicated the robot part with some enhancements.
When you say a robot, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's like a small fridge. It has a robotic arm. So essentially, we send that to the restaurant. It stays there for 3 to 4 days. So when they have a new dish, they put it in for 15 seconds. We do image recognition.
Why is this just not the startup itself? This sounds super cool.
I know it is cool. So we from the image...
No, wait, hold on. I'm kind of serious for a second. Okay.
I like this more.
Yeah, I like this a lot more. We're gonna write checks. Look, so let me tell you what I think is happening, founder to founder, for a moment. Then we rewind on whether this robot, you have too many things in this business, right? Regardless of how interesting this robot thing winds up being, you do have too many things. You're making the videos for them. You're having them shoot their food. You're creating new videos. You're not integrating with Yelp, OpenTable, Resi. You're competing with all of them. It's a marketing agency that's trying to build an all-in-one app that will not work. Is my stance. Every founder proves somebody wrong. So that's my overall feeling of how many pieces you've identified for us.
Yes.
Let me still ask the explicit question.
Of course.
Why is the robot not your product?
So it's not the problem we want to solve. And I'm here not just to make money. I'm here to make, solve the problem.
That's the best answer you could have given to shut me up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I don't mean... first of all, I don't usually communicate that because people are like, oh my God, there's so many things, I'm like, okay. So I usually don't talk about it. It's cool when people see what we're doing.
How do you build it? Is it off the shelf parts or?
No. Well, some of them are. So the arm is off the shelf. The box is something we're building in-house. Actually, we need to improve of that because now it's like a crazy situation.
And what's the camera?
Yeah, so we're using actually iPhones, and the reason behind it was to be able to resell them if something doesn't work. So what we do is we do image recognition. We recognize the type of food, and then we understand what's the texture, so we can calibrate our lighting, our angle, distortion, white balance, etc.
Better business.
This is such a better business.
And then, so then the software determines what's the primary color of the food, replaces the background with a color that makes the food pop.
Okay.
Does a pre-editing.
What's your name again?
Sturgis.
Sturgis. I hate most restaurant photos. I hate the Yelp photos they have. I hate when the owner uploads the photo. I want better photos for restaurants. Restaurants could use this for marketing. Consumers will be able to better purchase. It sounds like you could also meta tag all of these photos so you can still achieve your objective of this one has these dietary restrictions, has these ingredients to it, has this problem to it, weighs this much, all this other stuff. Please.
That's part of the pitch, actually, to some restaurants, because how, let's say, we do the agreement is we film them for free at first. They can try the platform for 6 months. They can use them on their social media, these videos, which they love the videos, obviously. But then if they don't want to follow on after the 6 months, they have, of course, to remove them from all the social media and wherever they use them.
He's literally using the Better Business as like a hostage taker on the restaurant for his app.
That's your paywall. Okay, well, let's get back then to how you make money. Like, I want to understand the consumer side. Is it just free for me to use it?
So the solution has been planned in a way so we have different revenue streams. So if one doesn't work, we have ready another one. There are a few main ones. One is we're processing the payments. So the way it works is that
he's also processing payments.
Because
I'm going to jump out of the window.
The main premise is
the robot.
The main premise is like the all-in-one app from discovery to payment. So,
can I tell you something about this though? So like, even if I agree with that mission, again, because I think everyone can get along with, if that world existed, we prefer that world.
Of course.
Your approach, all of your go-to-markets are really hard to achieve this all-in-one.
Yes.
Like you have 1,000 very hard go-to-markets.
Yes.
And a bunch of very bad customers.
Really bad customers.
Horrible customers.
I mean, the consumers don't want to spend, and the restaurants, and the consumer spend is going to go down in the next few years too. And then restaurants have nothing.
True, Restaurants are hard, and we had some hard lessons as well, because when it comes to the payments, just for clarification, the way it works is that you go to the restaurant, and if it's a partnered restaurant, then you can order within the menu. So as you see the menu, you can just place order. By the way, we don't have an add to basket, so it's a seamless experience. It's just say place order on the item. It goes to the kitchen, and then it's served. And when you're ready to go, off you go. You don't need to go through an online checkout, a QR code.
It's like Amazon's checkout store,
but a real one.
But it's another startup. That's another startup. That's an entire.
But here's
third or fourth startup we've learned about.
Here's the thing: we signed a deal with a payment processor. I'm not going to reveal the name. Google is using them, and Venmo, maybe some people know who I'm talking about. And we have
Braintree, Stripe.
We have the most competitive pricing right now. So if you're processing payments with Flavor, it's going to be the lowest compared to Toast, compared to Square, to any others. The reason why is because Venmo has 48% of their business is just splitting restaurant bills. So people believe if you take this out, the whole business is out. So that's why we were able to do that. However, what we learned is that restaurants don't care. Initially, when we made this deal, we were like, oh, here's what we have, and nobody cared. But when we told them about the way we do the videos and how they can use them and the insights, they were super excited. No, honestly, like we had a restaurant operator coming and saying, hey, we want like a pilot to 1,000 restaurants. And if it goes well, we'll also invest $4.5 million.
For the robot?
No, for being on the app, for being...
For the videos?
They want the videos and they want the reservation.
It's marketing agents.
How many people are using your app?
No, actually, we just ran a pilot on the recommender engine that it didn't even have videos. It was over text. People sign up. They give their preferences.
What did the restaurant pay for, though?
The restaurant
want to pay for?
The restaurants
videos.
Want to pay, not for the videos, actually.
Your app didn't have people for them.
They want to pay for the insights from what we did.
This one customer that you mentioned, what did they want?
Oh, no, they will pay for the pilot. And it's into millions of dollars just for the pilot.
The pilot of what?
Of piloting the app.
A marketplace that doesn't yet have consumers? No,
they do. They have restaurants. So a lot of restaurants, actually, something that a lot of people don't know is that they have other companies called usually operators that they do. They decide which software goes there. They do the hiring. They do a lot of the logistics. So there are a few that they manage tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of locations. And one of those reached out and they found fascinated what we do, and they said, hey, we want to try it out before we invest, and this is how we are now.
For the sake of time, I'm going to leave Brian the final thought here. I'm just going to say the robot.
Yeah, I don't feel a deep enough pain point. So I think that'll be the as I'm a seed stage investor, and so I would say I look forward to the next round would be my conversation, right? And so I would encourage you to think about converting some of those design partners into paying customers, because I don't quite see it.
Of course, yeah. Just to add on the last thought, we already have some great investors. We are backed by the AngelList early stage quant fund with GPs like the founder of AngelList, a lot of people from Redpoint and other ventures. So on that,
everyone is secretly talking about your robot behind your back.
Actually, these people, they invested before. I didn't even tell them about the robot because I was
okay,
like,
they
I didn't
want you
want
to
to
pivot to
confuse
the
them.
robot now that you've had it. So thank you so much for sharing.
Good luck.
Man, I really want him to build that robot.
He might after that.
Well, so let's end these four with your takeaway. What do you feel after hearing these four pitches?
There's a good saying, and you can bleep me out if this happens, but if there's a good founder building in a shit market, only one person's reputation changes later. I heard a few markets that are really, really hard to sell into, with really, really bad buyers, with extremely high churn, and I just don't know that I heard enough of a pain point being solved in those businesses to warrant any change in behavior of that market. And so I think for the founders that are trying to tackle big or hard markets, you really need to think about how acute the pain point is for the buyer that has literally over the last few decades decided to not innovate, to not buy new technology, to not improve their workforce, all of these things that have kept tech out of these industries. There's a reason why. And I would encourage you to think about why we're solving some problem right now that's so acute that they're going to change their mind.
Love it. And I think the biggest call to action there for the founders who are deciding to tackle this industry, to take the risk that their reputation might change after they also face plant into the wall. You should not only build a product, but have a pitch that's so good or compelling that at least some percentage of people seem to be chasing after you because they go, finally, someone's got it. Yeah. Still 95% of people will say, no, I'll wait and see you at the next round. But 5% of folks, investors, technologists, fellow founders should be going, well, that's a bet I'd make. That industry's finally going to get the kick in the butt it deserves.
Agree.
Of those four founders, Brian, who's your favorite? Founder pitch combo. So
first one.
Just first one, yep.
First one was a very technical problem. I would
invest in a nerd. I say that as a nerd.
Well, I would spend a little bit of time digging into the problem. We have plenty of customers we could call. We have more technical GPs that I know could actually go toe-to-toe with him on it. But I do believe there's someone paying $75K for that. I just don't know who, and I would look into why. But I felt like he deeply understood the problem that he was trying to solve. Maybe so deeply that he couldn't explain it to us. But there was clearly an acute problem there to me, and inside of an ecosystem that I know has a willingness to spend if you're able to solve their problems.
I'm also picking him. And the thing I'll say, one of the things that people say after hearing my pitch about free agency or talking about job search, I get a lot of people asking for advice or VCs asking me to help them evaluate an investment. And they go, I just know you're going to have an answer for everything. Whether or not I agree with you is a different story, but you've thought about all these pieces. You can tell he's thought about every piece to his business. He might not have a final answer on everything, but that's what I love. Someone who has become just so obsessed with their industry and their potential inside that industry.
He's a biz dev coach and a storytelling coach away from building a really cool business.
I love that. Yeah. We did it. Well, I'm excited to meet him afterwards too. That's the other thing. You get the feeling of, hey, I want to know more about this person. Yeah. That's a good pitch. With that, this has been a fantastic episode, Brian. We're about to hear 3 more, but for this segment, thank you to the founders. Thank you to you for your insights and your feedback. Round of applause to those 4 founders.